Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. I'm Peter Ndoro and this is what's coming up on the programme today. We take a look at the 2020 World Press Freedom Index, which is an annual ranking of countries compiled by and published by Reporters Without Borders. Our international editor feature takes us to Namibia. And in our news and history feature, we take you back to 2004. And it was great news for South African football. Find out what happened and where a little bit later on in the program. So we want you to guess what the sporting code was. So stay tuned for the answer a little bit later on the show. So that's the show. But remember, you can engage with us using social media. Our Twitter handle is hashtag SABC Media Monitor. Hashtag SABC Media Monitor. We're really going to go through some of those today, so please send your messages. And also WhatsApp. Our number is 065 862 4548. That's 065 862 4548. And try and keep your voice notes or your video messages on WhatsApp to less than 30 seconds. That would really be appreciated. Now, before we get into our highlighted stories on the program today, let's first take a look at what's on the front pages of your Sunday newspapers this morning. And we start with the Sunday Times. And the Sunday Times is leading with what seems to be a battle over when South Africa should come out of its lockdown. The health minister is defending the rules currently in place, whilst reportedly scientists say that they're being sidelined. Along with business and labour, scientists have warned government to fast-track the easing of the lockdown, saying that it's having little or no effect in stemming infections. The City Press, this reporting, businesses getting ready to open up, but Labour is worried about moving too quickly, putting scores of workers and taxi drivers at the risk of infection. Now, the Sunday Independent is leading with COVID-19, saying the army is gearing up for the worst, setting up 19 field hospitals worth 48 million rand, and has ordered all soldiers back to work, all in preparation for what the government believes will be a devastating impact of COVID-19 when it reaches its expected peak round about August. The Sunday Tribune is running a story of what they are reporting as financial irregularities and tender fraud found at the Amatola Water Board in the Eastern Cape. The paper says that according to leaked reports, the board's suspended CEO, Vuyo Zitumane, was involved in the manipulation of tender pricing with a controversial KZN-based transport and logistics company, Crossmore Transport. And the Sunday World is reporting about the concerns raised regarding the lack of transparency in the procurement processes as millions of rand is being spent on medical equipment in fighting COVID-19. There seems to be a veil of secrecy around the panel that's awarding these lucrative contracts, and it's believed to be to mainly white-owned companies. All right, so that's your Sunday newspapers. We'll take another look at those stories later on in the program. But first, let's take a look at some of the issues that have been trending on social media, particularly Twitter. And these are the top ones. And some of them, we see them all the time. Sacred Space, a program on Metro FM. And a lot of these, day 52 of lockdown, of course, people wake up to news of that. But the one that's got my attention is this one at number 9, and it's just called Ati. And what it's about is this young reporter who's a familiar face in South Africa, posted that she has now got her results and she's now got COVID-19. And this is affecting a number of reporters now. We had a camera operator just this past week, Lungile Tom, who works in Cape Town, getting the virus. and sadly passing away. Ati is fine at the moment, and she's confident, and we're all hopeful that she's going to recover from that. So people sending well wishes and messages to her to get well, and so it is real, and it's out there, and we all really need to be very, very careful. We'll be chatting in a short while to somebody who's managing an office of reporters, and just how this virus is affecting work in all areas. Okay, right, let's focus now on the COVID-19 case, which directly impacts operations at the SABC. Several public broadcasters, staff at Sea Point offices in the Western Cape are now working in isolation, and this comes after they were in contact with the late ENCA news cameraman Lungile Tom, who died from the novel coronavirus. We're now joined from the SABC by the Western Cape's regional editor, Kenneth Makatias. Kenneth, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. So, you know, this news of the ENCA cameraman passing away was received with great sadness, even in our offices at the SABC.
Yes, good morning, Peter. Indeed, I personally was so affected by it when I was called on Wednesday morning by the ENCA representative to inform me, because they knew that we also had people that were assigned to the same story that he covered the week before. Also remember, the journalism community in Cape Town is not that huge, so people quite often end up at the same event, or all the publications and broadcasters are normally represented at the same events. And you know, people also know each other on a social level and share WhatsApp groups and so on. And quite often you don't know people by name, but when one arrives at news events, they're there, they come to say hello, and you acknowledge them and move on. So yes, on Wednesday, when we started talking to people and informed them that we are implementing the SABC's protocols on how to deal with situations like this, and we put them into isolation and they had to follow the procedures and so on, I think there was a bit of a shock, and the reality hit home. Also remember that we've been planning for quite some time for this, you know, when this is going to happen. Now, okay, planning for it on the one hand, and then being confronted with it, and at the same time being informed that somebody's died, it's quite two different things. So people were very quiet, and not only those that were directly impacted on. Initially, there were three people that were identified. Sorry, two people. They went to the same briefing with the Western Cape Provincial Premier that our colleagues from ENCA went to. And then I was told later in the day that three other reporters were at another event also during that week that he was at as well. So in total, we then had 5 people from the office. So remember, this is also a regional office, so we are not very huge, or it's not a really big bureau, although we are one of the biggest regions of the SABC. So immediately you've got 5 people from your staff complement that's now going into isolation. For them, it's quite, we discuss everything with them, the situation at home and so on and so on. But those that left, that stayed behind, they were also traumatized by the event. And then, of course, you've mentioned Artie earlier. I was then informed on Thursday night that about the Newsroom Africa reporters, and I then was told that 2 of our colleagues were at the same event during the week, and we then had to put the SABC's protocol in place again. So now we sat with 7 reporters in isolation by Friday morning, and on Friday I had people here in my office crying because and I still get emotional about it, because they said when they came in on Friday morning, the office was too quiet. And normally there's a buzz here and people are drinking coffee and they're screaming and shouting. And they said it was so quiet, they got scared. So My whole role on Friday was basically to comfort people and tell them we are going to get through it, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So by Friday afternoon, all 5 that initially went into isolation, their tests came back, and they were all negative. And by Friday afternoon, for the first time, I've established a WhatsApp group, a COVID WhatsApp group to communicate to staff all the time and to share all information with them. So that WhatsApp group was very quiet. I was the only one communicating, sharing, updating, and so on. So by Friday, I've confirmed that everybody's test came back, it's all negative. And then things changed on that WhatsApp group.
Right,
they
I
were
can
paying
imagine.
tribute to Mr. Tom. They were playing music for him. They were making jokes the whole of Friday till late, quiet Friday night. So all 5 of our colleagues that were initially put in isolation, they have tested negative. We are waiting for the results, hopefully by tomorrow, of the other 2. And we believe that's going to, and we hope it's also going to be a negative as well. That's where our office is at the moment. Of course, it's severely impacted on our operations, but from the start, as I said, we were preparing for it, and we are dealing with it in the best way possible.
All right. So, Kenneth, what does it mean for operations? I mean, is there almost washing down of the office? What happens?
Look, the SABC has got protocols in place that, and I'm not going to run through it all now, but that we immediately put into place. Now, remember, so far in this office, we haven't had anyone who tested positive. So there's a protocol that we followed. So no, we haven't shut down the office, but at the beginning of this whole COVID-19 process, we had sanitizers installed in the passages, in the rooms. People were issued with masks. We've got people's fevers being taken when they come in. Initially, it was all strange, the way we were operating. Then I actually saw how emotional people were. One of the things, Peter, that I implemented immediately was that I shared all the information and I updated staff all the time. I normally call meetings at very short notice, or I send out notices all the time to keep them abreast, because what I also found is, half-truths and untruths and so on become the gospel, and then people follow that. So they come in all the time. When they hear something, they come and ask me about it. I confirm and deny to put them in the broader picture. And I think that's very, very effective. The other thing that I told them is that it doesn't matter what your problems are. It doesn't matter what your challenges are. We embrace everything. We deal with everything. We take them on board. We live with them and we work with them. My initial idea and plan was that I need to keep everyone on board. Also remember, people sit here with all kinds of medical conditions and so on, and challenges, and they've got their own issues at home and so on. So individually I spoke to all of them, especially those that I was aware of, and I worked with the HR manager here and so on. We identified people that might have problems. We asked them to go to the doctors and how we're going to deal with it. So I, for example, have got 2 people sitting in isolation in offices here where they work from. That was also after they consulted the doctors, that we are sure that we are not endangering anyone, put anyone's health at risk. But it's quite, it's a new way of doing things.
Right.
The other thing is that to a large extent, we then become quite dependent on technology. So we have to get everybody the right equipment and equip everyone properly. And then, of course, you come with a skills issue. Not everyone is on the same level. Some people just embrace it and understand it, and you have been using it. Other people are still struggling. Now, as I said, from the start, I said we are embracing everything. We live with it. And I think it worked. After all this work, despite health issues, skills issues, equipment issues, we've been sailing through it, and we are dealing with it. So I'm very proud of my colleagues in the C-Point newsroom, how they're dealing with all the changes, how they've embraced it, now they're supporting each other.
All right, Kenneth, we're going to have to leave it there, but great news about the first 5. Let's keep our fingers crossed for the other 2, and for the whole team. Stay safe.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks so much. That's our regional editor in the Western Cape. Kenneth McAteers giving us an update. Some of our reporters came into contact with Lungile Tom and Atim Tongana, who both tested positive, and sadly Lungile Tom, of course, passed away. But all our reporters so far still healthy. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll continue. And don't forget, you can send us your views on our WhatsApp number, and that number is 065 862 4548, and you can share your thoughts with us with anything that concerns you. And also on Twitter, hashtag SABC Media Monitor, hashtag SABC Media Monitor. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel. Now, the NGO safeguarding the right to freedom of information and the promotion of free independent journalism, Reporters Without Borders, sometimes known as Reporters Sans Frontières, has released its 2020 World Press Freedom Index. And the best regarded African countries for press freedom is Namibia, and that's ranked 23 in the world out of 180 countries, while South Africa is 4th in Africa and 31st in the world. Now, the index comes at a time that the world has been made vulnerable by the COVID-19 pandemic and a number of future threats facing journalism. Now, a few journalists we spoke to shared with us their thoughts about the Press Freedom Index.
In terms of being number 3, I agree, because in South Africa we do have laws that protect journalists when they do their stories or go out, do their stories. We also have a responsibility as journalists to report facts, not necessarily opinions. So being number 3, I think it's fair.
In a continent where there are over 50 countries, being ranked number 3 is a milestone achievement that cannot be taken away from South Africa. I think we're doing well. There are legislations that allow journalists to do their jobs with ease, to carry out their duties efficiently and effectively. The only thing we may need to fix will be maybe civil disobedience towards journalists. If we can work on that and ensure that journalists are free to do their job, then we'll be number 1 in the next few years.
Yes, we are happy, but on the practical level, we are not happy because media is still censored here in South Africa and there's no media freedom. Sometimes you can write something on Twitter or Facebook or in a newspaper, and then some people, they don't like it and they can take you to press ombudsman or they can sue you. And this is killing journalism, because we, as journalists, we are not allowed to express ourselves fully.
Media freedom in South Africa, yes. South African media enjoys the freedom. Either be the broadcast, print media or social media. We still find media holding the executive to account. Social media is holding the executive to account every day and nobody goes missing.
South Africa deserves to be number 2. Why I'm saying that is because I think Ghana is not as free as we think they are when it comes to delivering stories, and especially when it unpacking political and social stories. On the other hand, South Africa, we are free. We can deliver stories, political and social stories, without being fearful of the government or people. Namibia deserves number 1. Why I'm saying that is because they are free. They can go wild as much as they want.
Well, to share her thoughts on press freedom and some of the issues raised in the index and its report, I'm now joined by the CEO at Frey Intermedia, Paula Frey. Paula, always good to talk to you. Normally have you in the studio, but it's a new world, a new way of doing things, but still great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here. Thanks, Peter.
Great. All right. So this index has become, one of these barometers that we use quite frequently. It comes out every year. And if we look at the ones at the top, I suppose it's the usual suspects, isn't it? For some reason, the Scandinavian countries always seem to lead the way.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we need to recognize about the RSF World Press Freedom Index is that it's not simply looking at whether or not there's censorship in a country. It's actually looking at a whole range of different issues. For example, so how the level of pluralism in a country, so the variety of media that's available, media independence, the environment for the media, and self-censorship, the legal framework in which the media operates is one of the issues. They're looking at transparency, the quality of the infrastructure that supports the production of news and information. So it's much more than simply whether or not a government clamps down on press freedom, but it looks at the whole kind of state in which the media operates. And I think that's quite important to recognize.
All right. So what is it about the Scandinavian countries? They seem to be, at the top of the pile as we put up on our screens now, the top 5. But I was pleasantly surprised also that Jamaica came in at 6th, and that was quite unusual. The first country outside of mostly Scandinavia and sort of West Europe.
And even the island of Costa Rica, which is within the United States, I mean, that scores really highly, right? So, I mean, it really is about looking at the legal framework, about the ability of media to operate, and then the ability of media to actually operate within those countries. I mean, some African countries don't do that badly either. And of the 6 regions across the globe, Africa as a region actually is 3rd. And we have such a diverse media environment on the continent. We've got a country like Senegal, Namibia, where the level of media polarity is very high. The legal framework is good. In South Africa, we have good legal framework. We also have co-regulatory space with the press ombud in South Africa. And as you said, South Africa is 31, Ghana is 30, and actually the small island of Cabo Verde is actually up there in the top 4 for Africa, along with Namibia at 23. So really, we kind of not just looking at whether or not government clamps down on media. I think that's really important to recognize. It's also the environment in which the media operates.
All right, we're looking at those countries that you mentioned, the best performing in Africa. But let's turn our attention to the other end of this list, particularly when it comes to Africa, and that's the worst performing. And that's a sad one, but for some reason, some of those countries, not surprising.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, if you look at Eritrea, right, which is like 2 from the bottom of the list, it really is a country that kind of where the media operates almost at the whim of its political leadership. You've got, I think, at the time of the release of the index, we had 11 journalists in jail without access to their families or their lawyers. One of the things that I certainly took away from this year's list is that sometimes when you have regime change or you have political change, it doesn't make that much of a difference almost immediately, with the exception perhaps of Ethiopia, which came up a few steps this year. But even then, I mean, we're still looking at real issues emerging now and issues for concern, certainly issues of concern that were raised around May 3. But also, if you look at a country like Benin, which I think dropped about 6 places this year, and then there's a cluster there around 124 Tanzania, 125 Uganda, 126 Zimbabwe, which really are African countries where we know that from a political point of view, there's quite a bit of tension with the press at the moment. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's chat a little bit about this report in general. So we've seen the rankings, but it comes at an interesting time, doesn't it? It's sort of COVID-19, and that's had an effect on some of these countries and their rankings.
Well, I mean, I think that next year we'll see some shifting on the ranking. But I think one of the things that the researchers brought out this year, which we must really be thinking of now, is that the next decade, the next 10 years or so, is going to be really critical for press freedom because of a convergence of crises, actually. And we can see some of them are already, right? So, for example, we have an economic crisis. We're having I mean, already COVID-19, if you look at what's happening in South Africa in the last 2 weeks alone, we've had media houses closed. I know you've spoken about this before on your show last week, for example. I mean, you spoke quite a bit about it. We've had media houses closed. We've had people stop printing magazines and newspapers. The bottom of the media industry, not just in South Africa, across the continent, across the globe, in fact, the advertising has just kind of collapsed. And so this economic crisis is further impoverishing the quality of journalism, because journalists are being retrenched. The money that would have been spent on in-depth investigative journalism is now being used just to keep afloat. We also have a crisis of trust due to the suspicion and even hatred of the media. And during these tough times, very often people look for scapegoats, and the media seems to be these days quite an easy target. And then the RSF is also saying that there's a democratic crisis due to political polarization, a technological crisis. And we've seen this even now in COVID-19. We've seen restrictions of access to the internet. And then, of course, we know that there's a geopolitical crisis due to the aggressiveness of very authoritarian regimes. So all of these crises are coming together, says RSF, and it really is going to be a critical decade for us, whether or not we fight back and really fight to ensure that press freedom is maintained.
Well, I'm going to come back to COVID-19, because what we've seen in some countries here on the continent is, depending on how much information they want released and shared, the governments seem to be interfering. I'm thinking about Burundi. We've even had reports, sadly, of Zimbabwe just next door to us, where the authorities have been arresting journalists, supposedly just for doing their jobs.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, on May 3, MISA Zimbabwe actually issued a statement to say that, that I think it was 11 journalists or 15 journalists and newspaper vendors had been arrested and or attacked in 2 weeks prior to May 3. But we've also seen people shutting down access to the internet. We've seen journalists being attacked. Just yesterday, for example, SANAF issued a statement about a community journalist who had been attacked in a township outside Vicksburg. And so we had been attacked by police, actually, according to the SANAF statement. So I think we're seeing that on the one hand, the media are playing a critical role in getting information out during this time. And on the other hand, we are finding more and more attacks globally, actually, against the media.
You were talking about technology earlier and trust. And I guess, when I think about fake news, social media, and so on and so forth, those two kind of come together, don't they? Technology being readily available is also impacting on trust and the work that the journalists have to wade through to do their work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things I think that the general public is becoming more and more aware about the need to trust to treat unverified sources of information with a little bit of more skepticism. And so we're seeing more and more people saying, please don't forward things to me on WhatsApp unless you're absolutely sure of the source. And we're beginning to see that people are kind of thinking twice before they're simply sharing. I mean, I'm not saying that it's not happening. I mean, obviously it is still happening. But I think people are beginning to realize that if you want verified information, then you need to go to a media organization that really kind of builds its reputation by the fact that it verifies this information. And so people are becoming a lot more selective about where they're getting the information. I also think the fact that platforms have stopped the ability of people to kind of mass share and mass forward WhatsApp messages, for example, has also slowed down the speed at which fake news is being passed around. And then organizations like Africa Check are doing a really good job about kind of fact-checking things that are being put out on social media and making people kind of pause before they start sending out absolute nonsense without giving it a second thought.
All right, so at the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about the rankings in particular, and I think that some people might be surprised, but okay, so Namibia, we'll talk to somebody from there in a short while about why they've done well. South Africa at 31 out of 180 countries is quite impressive, especially when you think we ranked higher than countries like France at 34, United Kingdom at 35, I mean, that's quite and the United States at 45. And you'd think that these countries would be very high up the list, but we're doing and holding our own. What is it about our environment, do you think, that RSF has looked at and said that, you know what, South Africa, you're not doing that bad?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, first of all, South Africa has a very good regulatory framework. The laws in our country are very strong. I mean, I think that we know that our constitution is amongst the best in the world. I think our co-regulatory model, where we have the Press Council of South Africa, where really has members of the public and the press actually kind of looking at media, and we have an ombud who does a very good job, I think, of actually monitoring what is being done by the media, a public advocate who does a good job on behalf of the public for that, as well as we do have a very plural media, right? I mean, we've got community media, we've got commercial media, we've got community radio, TV, newspapers. So there's a diversity of media in South Africa that actually is very impressive, not just across the African continent, but also globally. I think that's quite important. I think one of the things that brings us down on the ranking is that very often that media is really struggling, and the infrastructure to support us is not really there all that much. But yes, you're right. We are quite impressive. We're number 31 out of 180 countries that are measured.
All right, so Paula, we're going to leave it there for the time being, but we'll have you back a little bit later on in the program to take us through the Sunday newspapers. But for now, let's move on. That's Paula Frey, CEO of Frey Intermedia, and we'll be chatting to, as I said, a little bit later on with the news headlines. So right now, though, we go back into our news archives and take you back to the 15th of May, 2004. I remember it like it was just the other day, and that's when South Africa, of course, won the 2010 bid to host the Soccer World Cup. Do you still remember the announcement at that time? And of course, Madiba was there, wasn't it? This is how the SABC covered that story.
The ball's officially in your court in 2010. Yes, we've got soccer's premier showpiece, the Soccer World Cup, 6 years from now. Today, a 7-year dream came true when football's world governing body, FIFA, gave the South African bid committee the thumbs up, and with no less than a majority vote in the very first round, 14 out of 24 votes. Anton Snyman was in Zurich when the announcement was made.
The long wait with great expectation. Word was out long before the official announcement, but still the tension was unbearable. The official announcement was delayed for the arrival of South Africa's magician, Madiba, another giveaway. His presence, the presence of fellow Nobel Peace Prize laureates F.W. de Klerk and Desmond Tutu, and President Thabo Mbeki made the difference.
By the way, yesterday, the presentations, this was professionally made. And all the candidates have organized from their countries representatives of the highest political authorities.
And then the announcement.
The 2010 FIFA World Cup will be organized in South Africa.
It was an announcement that made grown men cry. In contrast to 4 years ago, tears with joy, then tears with laughter.
We have to ask South Africa that if they accept to organize the World Cup,
that they did with elation, but also with dignity.
I'm feeling honored to be part of the process that has brought this history to South Africa, emulating the greats that have gone before me in making, landmarks, and footprints, in South Africa, in Africa, in the world. But I'm saying that, it's a statement that the South African must translate into action.
Always the idea was that Africa was not ready to host this event. And it was very, very difficult to first prove that Africa is ready and then prove that you are ready. So it was a twofold struggle, a struggle to convince the world that Africa can host the event and then say, we, this country, can host this World Cup on behalf of Africa.
South Africa should accept the results of these elections with humility, no arrogance, because we are all equal, those who have succeeded and those who have failed.
For Morocco, who is bidding for the fourth time, more disappointment.
We have the fair play spirit. We must accept the decision in all sovereignty of the executive committee that we respect. And we wish all the best for our South African brothers to organize a fantastic World Cup in 2010. And we will be there also as supporter.
7 years of hard work was rewarded today. Tonight, on their way home, they can celebrate before the real work starts, preparing for 2010. Anton Snyman, SABC, Zurich.
What a wonderful story, and a great World Cup it turned out to be, doesn't it? 2010. So that was 2004 when we won the bid, and we had hoped that we'd win it before, but it's never too late, I guess, to enjoy. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you. And we're hoping to go to Namibia to get a sense of why that country is the #1 African state in terms of press freedom. Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, and one of the things that we've been looking at today is the World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Sans Frontières, that's Reporters Without Borders. And I can tell you that in Africa, Namibia ranks as the #1 country on that Press Freedom Index, and we're now pleased to be joined by Isaac Hamata, who's a former CEO of the Namibia Press Agency, to give us a sense of what it is that Namibia is doing right, that they ranked so high on that press ranking. Isaac, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me. And good morning to all your viewers and listeners of SABC.
All right. The media in Namibia must be elated that you are the top country in terms of the Press Freedom Index. What is it about your country that allows for so much freedom?
First of all, maybe I must go back to 1991. Namibia is the home of the Windhoek Declaration that really declared the world to be a free, a fair and pluralistic media society. I think from then Namibia had the responsibility to uphold media freedom, because if you are the home of media freedom, you should be also setting an example in terms of allowing media to be free. In Namibia, our president, the current President Hage Geingob, has always been professing the need for a free and fair media, unfettered journalism, unharassed, undetained. And that is really what has been happening. There's been a commitment from the top to ensure that the media does their work freely without any hindrance. But I must also say it's not all joy and glory. There is an issue of access to information that's still a sore point in terms of Namibian media. When we celebrated Media Day this year, the media really called out on government to enact the access to information law. That is still in bill form. That still needs to go to Parliament to be discussed or debated and enacted. At the moment, it's with the Cabinet Committee, and we don't know how long that will take. So the media has said, although we are free, although we can do our work, although we have not been detained, although we are not being harassed, we still need to see government enacting the access to information law so that we can really feel as if we are really in an environment where we can do our work freely.
All right, so you're saying that authorities can withhold certain information that they want to?
At the moment, there's a 1982 Act that says Protection of Information Act. That is the act that media wants repealed and be replaced with an Access to Information Act.
Right.
And you must understand the context that once you have access to information, you are able to inform public about what's really happening in government sectors. Are state resources being used where they are intended to be used? Are they being used by the right people for the right reasons? That is really the issue that the media is hammering at the moment. Despite the fact that we are number 1 in Africa, number 23 in the world, we have been 17th in the world 5 years ago.
Right.
So
right.
it's nothing new. There is good and bad. There is good that we are getting the guarantees from government that we need to be free in what we do as media. But we are also saying it will be better if you have your access to information bill passed and become an act so that the media are able to access government information freely. At the moment, when you ask, media will tell you when they ask government officials for information, they get half-baked answers or none at all at some times, and that's really frustrating for somebody who's doing investigation into how government does their work.
I mean, you know, when we talk about, like I say, access of information is one thing, but are you allowed to write critical stories about the president, about how he's running the country, and how some of government officials are behaving or misbehaving?
That is happening, and I can maybe just 2 cases or one. We have what we call fish rot. This is a case involving 2 government ministers and other highly placed people in this country. These government ministers are accused of having defrauded the state through the state-owned fishing company of millions, if not billions, of Namibian dollars. They are now sitting in detention awaiting trial. They have severally tried to get out, attacking the laws of this country, and the judiciary has shown that there is need for them to stay in detention while investigations continue, and their detention was right and it was within the law. And the media, it is the media that broke that story. The newspaper called the Namibian newspaper in collaboration with the Al Jazeera television station. Yeah. They broke the story and it came out. Every other newspaper has then latched onto it and they have been reporting on it, digging up, and many things have come up. The case is still in trial awaiting phase, but many things have still come up. And
all right, it looks like we've lost Isaac Hamata on the line there, but thanks so much indeed for giving us an update. So Namibia, the top country in Africa in terms of press freedom, but even he says things can improve. All right, let's go back to Paula, who's joining us now on Skype, just to take us through the newspapers. Paula, thanks so much indeed for joining us. And I guess, you know, COVID-19 is going to be the front page of all the papers, although the papers are taking slightly different angles.
Yes, it's 3 very, very different lockdown stories from the broadsheets today, Peter. And the one that I read with a lot of interest was the Sunday Times story with the headline, Save South Africa in the Lockdown. And it really is quoting members of the Ministerial Advisory Committee coming out in support of quoted remarks by Dr. Glenda Gray that the lockdown has no basis in science and should be called off. So an interesting read. Yeah, I'd be keen to hear what you thought.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? And it's being debated in different ways at different levels, and it depends what end of the scale you are. You know, we're seeing Labour saying that we're scared if you ease the lockdown too quickly, then our workers will be at risk, and that taxi drivers, for example, will be at risk. And then you've got people who haven't earned money for 50 odd days now, who just want to get back to work.
Yeah. And then on the other side, right, you've got the Sunday Independent with the story that the SABC gears up for the worst, basically saying that the army is getting ready to put up field hospitals in stadiums, etc., which kind of really is the opposite impression from the debate that says we really need to get back to work, we need to get things going again. And then, of course, the City Press with the scramble to get to level 3. So I think, I mean, it's certainly going to be a discussion that we're going to be having for the next few weeks, just as we kind of come out of the lockdown.
All right, let's chat a little bit about the Sunday World, because, you know, whenever there's a crisis, there's always bound to be cutting of corners, and sometimes you have to speed things up in terms of procurement. And that is going to be one area, I think, when it's all said and done, we'll look back and say, perhaps there was an element of corruption, perhaps there was some cheating that took place, and that's going to be a big concern.
I have to confess, Peter, that I don't have the Sunday World with me today. Our local cafe didn't have all of the newspapers.
But generally speaking, I mean, you know, we've seen it in times gone by. State funeral, Nelson Mandela, all sorts of chicanery came out in various places. And I would imagine COVID-19 is not going to be any different. And we might even have a COVID-19 commission of inquiry in the future.
I think one of the things, I mean, we were saying it earlier on when we were talking about the Press Freedom Index. I think, it's a critical time for journalism, isn't it? It's a critical time to hold our elected officials to account and to be making sure that we're keeping an eye on what's being done and how things are being done. For me, certainly the concern really is that we're constantly monitoring what freedoms we're giving away, what freedoms we're allowing to be eroded, and which freedoms we're kind of really clinging to at a time like this. So you're right. I mean, it is a time for us to be keeping an eye on what is being done in our name.
What do you make of the media coverage? Do you think that the media has done enough, A, to keep people informed and to keep us safe, actually?
Yeah. I mean, so let us not forget that while we're at home, keeping safe, that journalists are actually out there getting the story and having to really kind of go out there and get a story in places that are quite risky. And so I think that one of the things that we are finding is that there's quite an of the way they're getting the story. Yeah. Sorry.
All right. You know what, Paula, I'm going to leave it there. You're starting to break up, but I think we've covered the gist of the main stories. But thanks so much, Paula. Always a pleasure talking to you. Stay safe.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Peter. Stay safe.
All right, okay. Let's cross now to our SABC journalist, Samkele Maseko, who's at the Fourways Memorial Park, north of Johannesburg, where the funeral of the late Dr. Clarence Mini is set to commence. Samkele, thanks so much indeed for joining us. We've been seeing some images of this funeral, and in the midst of COVID-19, the big issue is numbers, isn't it? It's small, and social distancing and other rules need to apply still.
Yes, indeed. Those rules of social distancing and a minimum of, or maximum rather, of 50 people at a funeral is being adhered to at this funeral of Dr. Clarence Mini, who passed away after contracting this deadly pandemic, which is COVID-19. Earlier on, when we saw his remains arriving here, we saw the various personnel that were helping with carrying off the casket or the remains of Dr. Mini into this particular Fourways Memorial church here behind me. They were fully kitted with protection, with personal protection equipment, masks, and all around as if you are in a specific surgery, as we had seen when South Africans were being repatriated from Wuhan and being sent to the ranch for that particular quarantine period. They were equipped and wearing those personal protection equipment that we normally see medical practitioners wearing. So those are the extreme measures that are being taken here. Earlier on, when you were cutting to us, you saw the visuals of the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, arriving here at this specific funeral. I'm just going to ask my colleague, Kwazi Manzi, just to show you other visuals of other dignitaries or other government officials arriving here for this specific funeral of Dr. Clarence Mini. You can see there the Minister of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation, Lindiwe Sisulu, arriving for this funeral here. They are adhering to those numbers of a maximum of 50 people per time at the funeral, and various exchanges will be done I also do know that there will be various messages being disseminated by various politicians and other important people. We do know that Bulelani Nguga, who formerly used to be with the Scorpions here, with the NPA rather, here in South Africa, will be speaking on behalf of the Mini family. We do know that Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, will be speaking, and the main keynote speech coming from government will be coming from the Minister of Health. That would be Dr. Zwelini Mkhize, who's also arrived here and who will be coming out of his vehicle anytime from now.
All right, Sam Kelly, I think that's where we're going to have to leave it, but no doubt we'll be crossing back to you a little bit later on the SABC News Channel for more on this funeral. Thanks very much indeed. And that's where we say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining us on Media Monitor this week, and I hope that you'll join us again at the same time next week. In the meantime, don't forget that you and I are responsible for each other's safety. Wear your masks, social distance, wash your hands, and stay at home if you don't need to be out there. Take care and stay safe.